Welcome to the Modern Divorce Podcast. It's Billie Tarascio, and we are joined today by Virginia lawyer. It's going to be a really interesting episode because Virginia has really different rules and they require fault in order for you to get divorced. Now, you may know this lawyer on TikTok. That's how I met him. Brandon, share with us your TikTok handle.
The lawyer of TikTok, which was surprisingly not taken, actually, when I started about 2.5 months ago.
Oh, so you're only 2.5 months in. Good for you. All right. Well, Brandon, tell people what it is that you do in Virginia.
So in Virginia, I do family law. So most of it entails divorce and child custody cases, child custody and visitation. Obviously, whenever you say a child custody case, you mean visitation as well. And I would say it's about 60 to 70% in that range, dealing with specifically family law, which also includes adoptions, which I think any domestic attorney would say that's probably the bright side of their practice, is when they get to bring a family together. And I am a sucker for that moment because I tear up every time. It's so happy. And then I do probably about 10 to 20% criminal law, and then 10% random other things. It's probably even less than 10%, but 10% is just a good whole number. So
got it. So here on the West Coast, well, and most states across the country have gone to this no-fault divorce system. And what that means is you can get divorced for any reason, anytime you want to. You know, you got to go through the procedures, but you can get divorced. Nobody can keep you married. But Virginia is not that way. So tell the listeners what that means.
So in Virginia, and it's weird for me because Virginia, and I'm born and raised in Virginia. I went to college in North Carolina, but came back. So I'm only used to Virginia. Virginia doesn't have the, I forgot the specific name for it, but the bar exam where you pass it and you can practice in all the other states that recognize that. Virginia is not one of them. I would be surprised if they ever went to it, to be honest with you. So Virginia has, whenever parties get separated, and in Virginia, I know some states you can file for a legal separation. I hear that quite a bit. So Virginia actually considers your date of separation the date just where one party had the intent not to remain in the marriage anymore. So, right, I know it's like, oh, that's a very broad definition. It is. So usually what I like to tell people is it's a date where something major happens, something that can be reflected in, somebody moving out. Even in Virginia, you can actually be separated under the same roof, which is a uphill battle to prove that, but that can happen. So I guess getting back to my main point, if you're separated, the day after, you can go to the court and file for a contested divorce, and it has to be a contested divorce. And that's why in Virginia you have contested versus uncontested. Uncontested is where you have to be just separated. So if you don't have any minor children, then you have a separation agreement, then realistically you can be divorced in about 7 months if everybody signs everything they need to. And then but with regards to the contested divorce, there's 3 major fault-based grounds that you can file on, and they kind of have little categories within them. So the first one is adultery. That's pretty self-explanatory. Now it has to be proven by clear and convincing evidence, which clear and convincing, at least the way they treat it in Virginia, is almost to the point of beyond a reasonable doubt. Of course, they're not going to say that in the case law anywhere, but realistically in courts, that's what I have found. It has to be pretty evident, not just circumstantial.
So can we talk about that for a minute?
Yeah, absolutely.
Does that mean you have to prove that your spouse had sex with someone else? Or can you show like lots and lots of text messages, that sort of thing? Can you show meetings, time spent together, dates, weekends away? Will that cut it?
So half yes, half no. So text message confirming having sex with another romantic interested party would usually get you there, but especially when it's from the adverse party that you're going up against, basically reflecting what happened in the text message. And that happens quite a bit, which is very surprising to me.
Oh, people not do that.
Yeah, and that's where you go busted, and then you have it, and then you're good to go, and you send it to them, and they're shocked. Of course, their attorney didn't know because
But what
their
about
client's been
sexting
so
between
like
lovers?
right. So I guess and that's where the line is a little blurred. So it has to be pretty like circumstantial is, not really one party admitting or saying anything. If the I guess paramour is the lover were to say something and then the cheating party were to basically not deny it, but send like one of those winky emojis or smiling emojis or something like that, that would probably be able to get you there if you can use the other stuff too. So like the away trips, the weekend trips, that alone wouldn't get you there, but that in combination with the other things would.
Wow. Okay. And
So
let's say that you can prove that your spouse cheated on you. What do you get out of that besides just the ability to get divorced?
yeah, so very, very good question. So any of the fault-based grounds in Virginia essentially is one of the many different factors that the court takes into consideration when dividing up assets, called equitable distribution.
Okay.
So people need to know that at least in Virginia, the pendulum or the scales of justice, if you want to use the formal legal term, starts at the 50-50 mark. Anything brought in, purchased from date of marriage to date of separation is presumed joint marital property. It doesn't matter whose name it's in, who purchased it, or whose benefit was received. It doesn't matter. That's the presumption. Of course, there's exceptions, like if your family member gave you a gift specifically to you, things like that. But, start at 50-50, and then the circumstances, cause it to swing in favor of somebody else. So it's not like, oh, my spouse cheated on me, so I'm gonna get 100% of everything. It doesn't work like that. So it would usually slide to, 60-40, somewhere in the 70-30, probably worst case scenario. But that also depends on how long they were married. Length of marriage is also in that same fact category.
Well, and does it
So
depend on how much money they have? Like, what if they have $10 million? Does somebody get $1 million because they got cheated on?
they could. I mean, if they had $1 million worth of assets and it starts out at 5 and 5,
Yeah.
it can go to 6 and 4 real quick.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's an expensive decision.
Right. And that's what both the parties are equal as far as income are concerned. That's another thing that's taken into consideration. Like I had a case where one of the party who got cheated on they were married for a long time. She was 100% disabled. She became 100% disabled legally during the separation time period, and couldn't go back to work. And not to mention, she didn't really work much during the marriage anyway. So that works, heavily against, very unique set of circumstances for sure. But it's not a do all say all. The only thing that adultery is a do all say all for, and of course in Virginia there's exceptions for everything, is the party who committed the adultery, and it can be proven by clear and convincing evidence, cannot get spousal support or alimony. So I always use those terms interchangeably because Virginia, the statutes refer to it specifically as spousal support, but alimony, same exact thing.
Interesting.
But it would say, unless it's a gross injustice. So there is an exception. So it's like, well, it's not even kind of a do all say all either.
Okay, so and then you had said that one of the other grounds is cruelty. Can you define
cruelty? So that's
cruelty?
Yeah, so cruelty is usually, now the biggest one is the physical abuse. So a lot of times you have a domestic assault and battery situation. That's usually that a lot of times, sadly, that's kind of the kickoff point for the date of separation, would be that specific event. So the physical cruelty can be proven by, a criminal case like that. Warrant taken out, somebody's found guilty, and they never reconciled after that. And be like, this was why we separated. This is why we're getting divorced. So you have the physical cruelty. Now you can also have essentially mental cruelty or verbal cruelty. So basically causing mental abuse on the other spouse. So most of the time that's very hard and difficult to prove. And that's where you hear things like battered women syndrome coming up into play. And that's verbal, not physical. So and that's always, from doing this job, I've realized that is a very significant thing that takes place, and it is very serious. And sadly, there's a lot of women that I talk to that, will call me, explain a circumstance, and then even have me move forward on something. And then they say, we reconcile. And like, I've had people do that same people do that to me 2 or 3 times. So, it's a lot of times the mental cruelty can be very tough to prove in court.
Okay. So how would you prove it? Like, for instance, I had a woman I spoke to yesterday who brought in counseling records. And in those counseling records, the counselor said that he had been abusive to her and that he was, he had his assignments to go work on X, Y, and Z. And her assignments, very clearly written down black and white, were to go like heal from the trauma of abuse. Like, that's what this counseling record said. Would that be enough?
That would be enough. So you can use expert testimony.
Okay.
Or experts saying that we've interviewed both parties, especially if it's like a marriage counselor. They know they've interviewed both parties, so they can testify to their dynamic. And in Virginia, so experts can use hearsay evidence. So basically, they can use statements made by your own client to, to say to the court what their expert opinion is in regards to this person has suffered significant mental abuse. So that would get you there for sure.
So the really interesting thing about this is it changes the nature of the divorce completely. So if you have somebody who's looking for vindication can be achieved in your state and in your courts. And in Arizona and many other states, it's just not what the court is there to do. They're there to dismantle a business relationship. And you stayed, so you stayed. And there is no vindication. So I would imagine that might lead to longer trials and more expensive divorces. Maybe. How long do your divorces take?
So typically, I've had both realms. I would say the ones that are dealing with just being separated, and that also, there's certain other things that need to be taken into account too, like the length of marriage. Longer marriages typically take longer because you go through the discovery process and get all the financial statements. Usually it's the last 5 years. That's kind of the go-to if they've been married, I would say over 12 years or so. So digging through all those, is very, very time consuming. So, if I would say that by the time you schedule it, if they've been married for a long period of time, it could probably take up to realistically 2 years to do.
Wow.
Right. And then other ones, shorter term marriages, even if you have pretty crazy circumstances, would probably be right around a year, because the natural fallback is if you can't prove divorce based on 1 year separation. So that's why when I'm practicing, in my cases, I always schedule a divorce trial. I make sure it's after that 1 year mark, because judges, even if you have pretty significant evidence, they don't usually make rulings on the fault as far as granting a divorce based on fault, unless one party just stipulates to it, which, the parties in these circumstances don't get along very well, typically. So they usually will fall back to 1 year separation.
Okay, so the judge will grant the divorce. Okay, so the judge will grant the divorce based on the fact that you all have been separated for 1 year. I'm not going to make findings on fault. However, when they go to divide the property, it sounds like the property division will include some discussion of the fault issues.
Exactly right. That and any type of spousal support / alimony. So for instance, I had a case that we agreed on everything except for spousal support and alimony. So we literally went into court and we still had to have like a 4 or 5 hour hearing on spousal support, because it includes almost all those same factors for property, reasons for the dissolution of the marriage, income of both parties, any tax consequences of both parties, debts of both parties, if there's any children. So it's almost the same exact factors. So even though you agreed on everything else, you still have to have the parties testify to those things because it's all taken into consideration.
It's interesting that whether or not you have children is taken into consideration with alimony, because that's what child support is for.
Correct. And I always tell people too, at least in Virginia, that child support is its own animal. You need to kind of separate that out. Virginia has child support guidelines, and that's the presumed amount that the non-custodial parent, or I mean, even if it's 50-50, there can still be child support. They pay the other party. So, and that's pretty much completely separate. Because that's a numbers game. It's gross income, then any employment related daycare expenses, any health insurance payments, and if there is spousal support, it is computed into those guidelines. But I always say, child support is what it is. That's always what I tell people. And I've probably done, I don't know, 450, 500 at least cases dealing with child support, whether it was child support only or a custody visitation case that obviously brought in child support, or a divorce. And I've only had the court defer from those guidelines one time.
Wow. Interesting. Yeah.
And that was about 4 months ago. So it wasn't even and I've been practicing for 6 years now.
Okay.
And started doing child support and family law, I would say pretty consistently about a year in. So 5 years worth, only one time.
What is it that drew you to family law?
To be honest, so when I was in law school, the head partner here, and I say boss, but our firm is very much like a close niche environment. Everybody gets along very well. All the staff, all the lawyers, we have 6 lawyers, and anybody that works with other lawyers can tell you that it's usually you have egos just bashing against each other. We've been very lucky we don't have that here. So I was taking a law school class my second year, and I think it was called Law Practice and Technology, but realistically it was how to manage a small private practice firm. And after the class, he reached out to me and my best friend in the law school at the time, seeing if we knew anybody that needed a job. Well, at that point, everybody that we knew that was graduating already had a job locked up, but we said because we didn't have class on Fridays, we could help out. And so that basically ended up turning into an internship, and then from there offered me a job once I got my bar results.
Got
it. And this firm does general practice. I mean, it's family law, criminal law, and then I said, like, my 10% random other things. I don't do any civil litigation. So if you're, suing a roofer of your house because they didn't do a good job, I stopped taking those because a lot of times you mentioned so I stopped doing those cases to focus primarily realistically on family law. So, and to be honest with you, when I was in law school, family law was not the area I was planning on going into at all. I was planning on going into, business. But the thing is with large businesses, they're usually ran by older, more successful people, especially when I came out, because the baby boomers who have started to retire were still running these businesses. They don't want a 25-year-old representing them. That's just the reality of it. So, family law, and I've started to realize that I can actually help people as far, because family law, when you're dealing with clients, they're going through realistically the hardest time of their life, and being able to not just advise them on the law, but be somebody that they can talk to and help them through. Because before I got married, my relationship before that, it ended poorly. It went through a lot of circumstances that these people go through. So for instance, like my ex-girlfriend, we were living together, she took my shower head. Yes. And crazy part is, I've talked with some of my clients. I think 1 or 2 clients that I've had, that same thing has happened to them.
No way.
Yes. And I was like,
this is the first time I've heard of someone stealing a shower head.
And not to mention that my parents purchased for us. So it wasn't even hers, but neither here nor there, I guess. But so I've been through that, and I always make sure I tell people I'm not comparing it, because I'm not, because a lot of times these people have children. I don't have kids. I've been married a couple of years, well, a year and a half. But having children, obviously that's not something I can relate to on a personal level. On a core level, for sure. But being able to kind of give them words of encouragement, I try to help that, because I know it is extremely stressful.
Yeah. I want to know how your firm feels about your TikToks.
Very good question. So definitely, the first one I started actually New Year's Eve, and it might have been posted on New Year's Day. So I think I had technically a couple way before that during the pandemic that I was making fun of my roommate, or my wife's friend was rooming with us or staying at our house because she was going through a tough time, and she would always be filming things. So I took a couple, just basically saying, like, filming her taking pictures of food. Nothing at all compared to what I do. So those are on private, and I can see those. So for Christmas, I got a bunch of my sister-in-law and my wife have been trying to get me to do it for I would say the last year. I'm like, So they got me a bunch of gifts, like a ring light, a microphone, and guilty conscious. I got into it on New Year's. So, and the first video I had was actually me doing the Celine Dion trend in one of my wife's like reception dresses from our wedding. It was absurd. And that, of course, naturally, somehow I get a screenshot from the head partner here of a video of him, and we have a firm group chat, and he'll of course be making fun of me, like, what is this? But over time, especially when I had one video go viral, he's been like, the last lawyers meeting we had, he even said, Brandon, I would tell you to get off of there, but it's working, so whatever. So
Well, that makes sense. At first, they're like, what are you doing? You're demeaning the profession, because Brandon's TikToks are they're silly. They're really, really silly. They're dancing, they are. They're gimmicky, they're comicky, they're just for fun. He's not doing a lot of, educating or pontificating. He's just entertaining.
No education in the least bit.
It's not really your thing. It's not your angle. So I can see why the law partners might be, irritated with that, and say you're demeaning the profession or whatnot. However, nothing speaks like clients, and if clients are coming in, then I guess your work does speak for itself.
Right. Yeah. And the cool part is I'll see a lot of my previous clients and even current clients commenting on it, and I make sure there's a line I won't cross in posting things. Like, I kind of treat it the same way as I tell my clients when they're going through a custody case, and I'm like, look, you got to word things, that you have to, a judge is going to read these things, and you got to make sure that there's nothing not, I would say, embarrassing by any means, but I want to try to be different, help people relax through this tough time. And a lot of times, I'm sure you probably know, a lot of times the lawyers they have difficulty being real people, and I think it helps people going through tough times to see that, hey, there's somebody that's a real person that can also fight for you in the courtroom as well.
Totally. Absolutely.
So,
well, Brandon, thank you so much for your time today. If you've enjoyed this podcast, make sure to like, subscribe, and review this, and we will talk again soon. Thanks.